Hello, and welcome to this ThinOS 9.1 overview technical training. I'm going to take you through 10 demos that will help you get a solid understanding of ThinOS features and functionality. Whether you're a longtime user of an older version of ThinOS that is about to upgrade to ThinOS 9, or you are just starting on your journey with ThinOS, this video will help you. Hopefully by the end of this half hour, you'll have a firm grasp of the knowledge required to manage and deploy ThinOS clients. For the first demo, we're going to use the Local Admin Policy tool to allow remote control and locally install the Microsoft WVD package. As I boot up a ThinOS 9.1 client for the first time, it'll enter a setup wizard. During this wizard, I have the option to set things like the language keyboard. I'll accept the EULA and then select the language and keyboard and time zone, etc. At any time during this, I can hit Control Escape and exit out of the mini wizard. And I'll go ahead and do that now. Now I'm into my unconfigured ThinOS 9.1 client. If I click on Settings and then go up to Remote Connections, I can see where I can actually locally define broker connections. You can see here this is where I would set my Citrix virtual apps and desktops, my VMware Horizon broker server, my Windows Virtual Desktop Broker, Microsoft RDS Server, Amazon Workspaces, or TerraGG Cloud Access Broker Server. I also want to show you for this demo, under System Tools, Packages. This is where it'll list any applications or add-ons that are installed under my ThinOS 9. Right now, there's no packages installed. So locally on the system, I can use the Admin Policy tool. From here, I can define policies just like I would through our centralized management system, WMS. So I want to enable VNC server locally on the device. And I can go ahead and click here, enable VNC. I can set a password. And you can see there's other settings that I have the option to turn on here. For this one, I'll go ahead and just leave it enabled with a password so that I can remotely control the device. This is useful when you're first testing a device, so you can get control and see what's going on. I also want to download the Microsoft WVD package, and you can see where I went to dell.com/support and then select Browse All Products, Thin Clients, Wyse Hardware, and then I'll select the model. So let's say in this case I want to get a package for the Wyse 5070. I select Drivers and Downloads, and then you'll see listed the different firmware and packages. So if I scroll down and show all, I can see here the Microsoft WVD package, and I'll go ahead and download that. Once that's extracted, I'll see a PKG file. That PKG file can be directly imported into the local admin policy or WMS and then deployed. Since I'm using the admin policy tool, I'll go ahead and import it here. You can see under firmware, I have application updates, and I'll just browse. Now in this case, I'm using a thumb drive plugged into my system, so I went ahead and downloaded various packages and plugged a thumb drive into my Thin client, and I select the WVD package. Once it's uploaded successfully, I can just click on the drop down and select it. So now this system will get this locally defined policy which will install the WVD package. So now when the system reboots, let's go ahead and check where we did before. Once it's finished its boot up process, I can go into System Tools and then look under the Packages tab, and now I can see the Microsoft WVD package is indeed installed. The other thing I did for this demo, remember, was I turned on VNC server. So if I look at my device, I can see here the IP address 192.168.0.154. So on my local system, I'm going to go ahead and run Type VNC Viewer and connect to that IP address. I specify the password that I set earlier, and you can see here now I have a VNC session to my Wyse ThinOS 9.1 client, and I can control it, etc. So let me go ahead and minimize this. So that was a quick demo just to show you the local admin policy tool and installing a basic package. So for the next demo, what we're going to do is we're going to actually leverage that package and create a static RDP connection using the local admin policy tool again. So I've got my system here still on my VNC connection. So if I go in here under Settings and Admin Policy Tool, and then click under Session Settings, RDP and WV Session Settings, and I can see my direct RDP settings. I'm going to go ahead and add a connection. I'm going to make an RDP connection to my domain controller in my lab. This is similar to typing MSTC on a Windows PC and making a terminal server connection. I'll set the option so that the connection will be full screen, and I am using the IP address, but I could also use the DNS hostname. Now I'll go ahead and save and publish that. And before we reboot it, I'm going to go ahead and change the connection broker setting, because in this case I'm not going to use any broker, so I can select none from the list. And when you make a broker setting change, it'll prompt you to reboot the Thin client, and since I'm VNC, I've lost my connection, and so I've moved over now to viewing the screen directly on my ThinOS client. Now when the Wyse boots up, because I have no broker setting, it goes right past the login screen and it sees that static connection to my lab domain controller. I click on that and I'm prompted for user credentials, so I go ahead and do some user credentials I have for my lab server, and I'll log in and connect to my domain controller. This is just to illustrate kind of the basic connectivity. Obviously we're going to want to go to more advanced settings, and we'll be using our centralized management system to configure the device the majority of the time. But this illustrates a basic connection with a basic package on the system. So now that we've completed demo 2, let's move on to the third demo. So for this demo, we're going to install the VMware Horizon package, and then we're going to make a connection. So getting a little bit more increasingly in the complexity and maybe more realistic to the work that you might want to do. So we need to download the Horizon package like we did before at support or dell.com/support. Since I downloaded those all, they're on the thumb drive, so I can simply go to the admin policy tool. Same place we did before, under the firmware section, application packages, and I'll go ahead and select the Horizon, and again it's a PKG file, and that will upload it to the system after I accept the EULAs. And then once it's uploaded, I need to remember to, from the drop-down list, go ahead and do a select here and make sure that it will be installed next time the system boots. Before I go on, I do want to show you in the local admin policy, I could actually set the broker settings in here. Again, this is a similar, actually exact same interface as WMS, that it could centrally push it. But I'm just going to save and publish, just pushing the Horizon package to the system. We'll go ahead directly on the local interface and set the connection broker in just a moment. But before we do that, let's just look under Settings, System Tools and Packages, and verify that we have both packages. So now I've got, besides the Microsoft WVD, I've got the Horizon. So I'm going to go under Remote Connections here, and then I'll select VMware Horizon. Before I put that information, I'm bringing you over to my View Connection server because I want to show you exactly what information I enter there and why I do that. So I'm going to go ahead and log into my VMware Horizon server. Once I'm logged in, I can see my dashboard here. I'll take a quick look. I generally do this, look at my machines that are listed here in the desktop pools. I just want to make sure that I look and I see, okay, I have an available Windows 10 machine that I can connect to, so I know my demo is going to work. And then I look at my connection server here. If I look on my connection server under Connection Servers tab, and then Edit To display the properties, I see the URL. That's the URL I'm going to need. So I'm going to need that https srvr06-view.test.net. So let's go ahead and just put that up to the side, and I need to remember that. So I'll go ahead and take my broker type and switch that to VMware Horizon and then type in that broker information. I'm going to say low because I'm not using security certificates yet. We'll get there. And then we'll click OK. Again, a broker change is going to prompt you for a reboot. Now this device will boot up. And again, we chose to do the low security, so we aren't going to be using certificates, so there will be the red HTTPS crossed out before the broker server. So now but I do have a connection, so I'll go ahead and type in a lab user1, my password, and log in. Since I've only got a single desktop pool available to this user, it'll go ahead and launch a desktop for that user and take you directly in. I'll go ahead and log out and it'll bring me back to my Thin Client desktop. There is a setting where I could do the action to, when I log out of my last desktop, to log me out of the Thin Client. But for now, I'll just go ahead and just sign out here. And it's back ready for the next user. So for the fourth demo, we're going to do the same thing, but I do want to make sure that we install that certificate and we get the secured connection to our Horizon desktop. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to get that same URL. And the easiest way to find out the certificates that you need is just to paste it into a browser. And then you can actually just click on the certificates from in there. And then you actually are given the ability to export certificates as well. I often use Chrome for that, but I can see here I need that srv-view.test.certificate. And again, I went ahead and put that on a thumb drive because I want to be able to get that to my client. So now I go under System Tools and this time go to the Certificates tab, and the default is to import from that thumb drive. I can find that certificate and click OK, and that will import it to my ThinOS client. We'll go ahead and close here. Now before I reboot, I need to go ahead and change my remote connections and my broker type. I'm going to go ahead and switch it up to full security now that I do have the certificate. And then we'll reboot one more time. When the client comes up, it'll actually show me the username and password login field, and it'll give me confirmation that the certificate is successfully installed and the green before my view connection server. So now I was able to make a connection, a secure connection. So for the next step, we've been doing everything locally. Now I really want to show you how you're going to do things a majority of the time, and that's going to be using WMS policies. So we'll create a policy for this. So here's my locally installed WMS server. I'm going to add a new group. I'm going to call this Demo View, and then I'm going to set a number of policies that will apply to this, and then I'll actually point the device at this group. So there is my group called Demo View that I created, and I created a group token for that. That's under my default policy group, which doesn't have any policies into it, so there's no policies here yet. So now I go under ThinOS, and I'm going to do the same things, and again the interface looks very similar, or again very much the same. And I go under Services, and I go to VNC Service, and just like I did on the local admin policy, now I'm going to do it through the centralized policy, and I'll set a password. I also can install the certificate, so instead of importing them from the thumb drive, I can browse and find them. So I need that SRVR 06-view server certificate. So once I upload that, I can select that off. And again, I'm making these settings apply to this policy called View Demo. So for my server connection broker, I will set View, and then the connection broker is that same connection server. And I can go ahead and set it to full security because we know we're going to import the certificates as well. And then one additional thing that we didn't do locally, I'm going to go ahead and under personalization, click on desktop, and I can browse, and from any picture that I have on my desktop, I can select that. So I've got one called VMware.jpg. So there's going to be a VMware login that's going to go to the background instead of the bridge that we were seeing typically before on our ThinOS client. So we're reviewing the settings. You can see certificate set there, broker there, setting the background, and then enabling VNC. So some pretty simple things. And look at my defa-view demo group, and then also look at my server name. I'm going to need both of those bits of information on the client. So at this point, I did reset my device to defaults, so there are no settings to it. I just want to be able to make sure that they are all coming from the server. And I'm going ahead and I'm typing in that defa-view demo, which is the group key, and that is case sensitive. And then my WMS server, by default, it's pointing out to the cloud. So if you're using an on-prem server, you need to actually put your server name inside of here. Once that's done, again, if you're not using CA validation, which I'm not in my lab, go ahead and take that off and just verify that the group key matches, and it does. So I'll validate the key, and it'll say it's successfully checked into my WMS server. And it put it directly in that view demo group, and that view demo group will automatically can see it just like that. It popped up and showed the customization with the VMware background. I'm going to go ahead and restart it because I did make a change to my broker and I want to get prompted for that. So as the device boots up, you'll see that I've logged in. Now, I will point out that I did reset the device to default, but I did not delete the Horizon package. So you would need to make sure that you have the Horizon package to do that demo. So for the 6th demo, I'm going to reset the device to factory settings, and then I'm going to add it to a WMS server group one more time. And again, this is something, if you're demoing or testing with ThinOS and you're making changes perhaps in the local GUI and you're setting it through the WMS server or even the local admin policy. So you just click on reset and make sure you select the reset the system to factory defaults, and it'll bring me to this wizard. So you make sure, you may want to know how to do this. And again, I get to this mini setup wizard and just control escape to get out of there. And then this time I'm going to put it in a group called a corp root, or I'm going to put it in my default policy group. You can see the default policy group is there and has a complex password that's set up for you when you install. You can change that password, but the default default group key is there. So I just type in that group, and this will put it in my default policy group. So it'll register it with WMS. So just like I did before, I need to make sure I put my server name. I'm always going to need these 4 bits of information. I'm going to need my group key, my WMS server, the MQTT server, and then whether CA validation is on or off. And the MQTT server, you actually won't need it. We'll fill it out when you're doing it locally. But you can see my device is now in the default policy group. So I've reset it to default and I've got it checking in. Now, realistically, when you're deploying lots of systems, you don't want to be having to type in the group key or the WMS server information. You want to leverage either DNS or DHCP option tags to automatically put that information on your system. So here, I'm just going to go into my DHCP server and I'm going to go to set predefined options, and I'm going to add custom options so that any device that's turned on talks to my DHCP server will get an IP address. It'll also get specific information about the WMS server and even down to the level of what group that the device should be in. So you can see you would add them there. I'll go ahead and show you my settings and I'll turn them on. So I've got a 165 for WMS server. I've got my MQTT server with 167. 167 is the CA 166 MQTT server, and 199 is the group key. I'll go ahead and blow that up so you can see that. There's the 4, and those are the best practice to set all 4 of those for support for older clients. For ThinOS 9.1, you would only need the server, the group key, and then also whether CA validation is on or off. So now that I've got my device there, I'm going to go ahead and unregister it. The reason I'm doing this, I want the device to come in just like you're bringing it out of the box. So I'm unregistering it, and then I'm going to go ahead and delete it from my non-registered device. So this is removing it completely from my WMS database. So now my WMS device doesn't know about this server, this thin client at all. I'll go ahead and reset it to factory defaults. The device boots up, gets an IP address, and you remember, every time I did this before, I would get the mini wizard. This time it says, oh, you're already assigned to a WMS server, and it puts me in the corp root group, which gives me the blue wallpaper on the background of the Dell login. If I go under remote connection or central configuration, I can actually click on the eye and see corp root, and that is the group key showing for the device. And if I click on devices and refresh, I should see my ThinOS device there in the corp root 9 group. So setting DHCP option tags is really important if you're going to do a large deployment and just the automatic out-of-the-box configuration of these devices. Next, we'll show you how to move a device, and we're going to move it to into a group that has a policy that'll configure the device for Citrix virtual apps and desktops. So you can see here my corp root, the highest level. I do things like I upgrade the firmware. I do a little bit of personalization. There was that blue Dell wallpaper. I upgrade the firmware on 9, and then I enable DNC. And then as a policy group underneath it, it'll inherit everything in corp root 9 into this Citrix VAD group. I'm going to go ahead and install my certificates. I'm going to configure the broker setting. And before we go further, let me go ahead and bring you over to my Citrix server, because since I am configuring the certificates and broker server, I want to show you where I get that information. So the broker URL, I'm going to just use my store URL as defined on my storefront server. And to get the certificates, I'm going to again just pop that store URL into a browser and then view certificates. And I can see in this case, I need a domain certificate and a machine certificate for my server. So I need both those certificates. So make sure you export the entire certificate chain, not just the certificate for the server you're connecting to. And then I'm just going to verify in my machine settings what I've got in my catalog. I've got just a 2019 server with a couple published applications, and that device, let's see, it is online and registered, so I should be good to go to connect to that device. So back over here, my login experience, I predefine the domain to test.net. I do a little personalization to a Citrix login, and then I add some packages. So I'm going to automatically install the Citrix Workspace 2012, the Zoom package for Citrix to do the optimization, and then the Improvada PIE, and just in case I want to use that. So now I've taken this device, I click on More Actions, I change the group. Remember, it was in the corporate group, that's why it's grayed out, and I'll move it to the Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop 9 group. So the device now, when I reboot it, you can see it's actually automatically got pushed to it. It's starting to download the Workspace app plugin. You notice it's downloading. It's actually going to install that in just a minute after reboot. The Zoom got pushed down in the Improvada PIE. So all of those packages are assigned. It's pushed the wallpaper to the device at this point. And so let's go ahead and accept the message that it needs to reboot. Now as I log in, it's giving me a message that there's a new firmware. What it's actually talking about here is it's talking about the Citrix Workspace app is new, so the 2012 version is available. So it's going to go ahead, and the system package is upgrading my CWA client on the device. And once that's done, it'll reboot one more time. Now I've logged in, or I've got to the login page. My domain is pre-populated. I go ahead and log in as my my test user, and you can see here with Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktops, I got a couple applications I can launch. You can see here, here's a Citrix virtualized app of Calculator. I'll go ahead and launch Internet Explorer. Again, these are seamless published applications running from the Citrix server. The technology formerly known as the Zen app It's the virtualized apps on here. Of course, if you have published desktops, Windows 10 desktops, you would see them here. Here I've got a Windows 2019 server desktop that I'll connect to in a full screen mode. And the same functionality would apply. If I only had one desktop pool, I would be automatically connected, or I could control that with some settings in WMS, which applications to auto launch. If I Alt-Tab, I can toggle through my different clients and Control-Alt down arrow to switch through. So here's again my Windows 20 desktop. I had my published applications. I'll go ahead and log out of the desktop, the server desktop, and I'll go ahead and close my published application there, my Internet Explorer. And you'll notice at this point I have the option to reset the system to default. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to sign out of the system. But actually preventing a user from resetting to default is something that you may want to do on a system. So that's where it comes into the next part of the demo. I'm going to actually show you how to lock down a device and set up the admin mode. So the lockdown will prevent the reset to default and access to local control. The admin mode will give you the ability to log in as a local user and temporarily give the system that high privilege level. So I've created another group called Citrix VAD Lockdown, and I'll hide the policies that are inherited, so I'm only showing the policies applied at this level. And you can see here what I've done. The main thing that's specified here is the privilege level is set to none, and then the admin mode is enabled. You can see my admin user name is admin, and then I've actually specifying an admin user password. Again, these are kind of like setting a local admin policy on a Windows system. Just gives you the ability to locally get on the system and make changes if you wanted to do that. So now that that device is in the group above that, I need to go ahead and change it from the Citrix VAD group to the child group, which is the lockdown group. So that lockdown, again, will get all the same Citrix virtual apps and desktop settings, but in addition, we'll be setting the privilege level and the admin mode. So I went ahead and rebooted here. If I click over to get to my start menu and I tick shutdown, you'll notice now when I go to restart, I got shutdown and restart, but there's no option to reset to factory defaults. If I click on the system settings, you can see how this is all grayed out and no access for the user. If I click on the little lock, this is where I would enter that admin password that I specified before. And once I do that admin user and password and click OK, you can see now in the top right, I've got my warning telling me that the system is unlocked and I have access to all the local systems. If I click on shutdown when I'm in this temporary position, I can actually reset the system to defaults. If I click on settings and then click on the lock again, it'll put it back down, and now everything immediately is locked back down and I can no longer reset the defaults or make any local changes. So the last system thing, we're going to go back out to dell.com/support, and we'll once again browse all products and select thin clients. Of course, if you had the service tag, you could enter that too here. But again, let's assume that we're using a Wyse 5070 thin client. And then under drivers and downloads, you can see the various downloads. One tip, you may want to actually select the category to operating system, and that's where you're going to make sure that you see firmware. But I've got it left open to see everything. And then, like for example, here is a 9.0 to 9.1.1131 package. And it says it's an operating system. If I click on the details, it tells me that it's a web package. So you want to make sure you're getting web-based packages. You do not want to get Merlin packages. Those are for bare metal imaging with the thumb drive, which is really only used for recovery, potentially of a corrupted system. You want to get a web-based package. So you'll get that package. Assuming you're already at 9.1, it would be like 9.1. Maybe something higher would be the next build. And then you just go ahead and browse, and you can assign that, that package file. You can see here I've got the Dell ThinOS 9.1.131, and it's assigned to that group. If I reboot the device, that firmware is applied. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you, and have a great day.